You are listening to Earn Your Stripes, presented by Cardinal Spirits. Welcome to a special edition of Earn Your Stripes. I'm Justin Albers here with Max Bielfeldt, as always. On this edition, which will be released on Monday, we're just going to break down the Indiana-Notre Dame game we saw on Saturday. A huge win for Indiana, the first time this season they've really broken through against a big-time opponent and been able to pull it out late. They've been close against good teams like Duke and Louisville, but they weren't able to win those games. They came back and they beat Notre Dame in the Crossroads Classic on Saturday. So this episode will be heavy on that. But first, a word from our sponsors. This podcast is presented by Cardinal Spirits, a distillery in Bloomington, Indiana. They offer simple cocktail recipes you can make during a media timeout so you can get back to the game without missing any of the action. You don't even need a recipe. Cardinal Spirits are so flavorful and high quality, you don't want to hide them or cover them up. For game days, we suggest a Bramble screwdriver with Bramble black raspberry vodka and orange juice, or a hot hopscotch with Songbird coffee liquor and hot coffee. For night games, you might try Lake House spiced rum and Coke, or you could mix it with apple cider to mix it up a bit. You don't want to be the guy who pulls out a cocktail shaker during the game, so just keep it simple and classy with Cardinal Spirits. CardinalSpirits.com for more information on that. Max, I'll bring you in now. Let's just get your initial thoughts on the game from Saturday. Indiana wins 80-77. For much of the game, it looked like another one Indiana was going to let slip away. Played fairly well, didn't shoot it great, but were able to come back with Juwan Morgan, Zach McRoberts, Robert Johnson, and others to win that game in the second half and overtime. Your initial thoughts on that game from watching it?
Yeah, they had all week to prepare after playing Louisville last weekend. The finals week this week, obviously focusing on school, but at the same time, Notre Dame sitting there at the end of the tunnel and with some disappointing losses and a lot of guys knowing that they're better than that, being in games like Duke and Louisville and the season being a lot different. I think he had some guys, especially Juwan, just absolutely taking over, being a man. And you saw guys like, I put out a tweet just how impressed I was with Zach McRoberts. He played 31 minutes and had 1 point, but 9 rebounds. And some of those rebounds don't even consider rebounds because they're tap outs. He got his hand on balls and the right Indiana guy was there to make something happen to it. So he was a part of a lot of great plays. He played great defense. Over 30 minutes is big, for a walk-on. Played about 13 minutes more than Duran. So I was really impressed with him. And Rob Johnson started to find his stroke there, 5 for 10 from 3. Indiana needs to be able to knock down that 3 ball. They just, you see too many times a lot of guys, you're laying off the Zach McRoberts and you're laying off the Duran Davises and even Juwan Morgan sometimes. And he shot a couple threes this year, but not a huge threat from out there. So it's nice to have Rob find that stroke. Devontae knocked one down. Colin hit a couple. Being able to stretch that floor is always important in the game of college basketball, especially. But obviously the story of the game was Juwan Morgan, 13 for 17. That's 76% from the field. That's just out of control. He shot 73% from the free throw line. He shot better from the field contested than he did from the free throw line. But just really overall impressed with the mentality down the stretch of the guys, being able to. Yeah, they got a little bit of slack from Torres not missing those free throws, but you got to think about these things is you got to be able to seize your opportunities, and when the doors open like that, you got to go in there and take it. And they finally took it and did what they needed to do.
Yeah, I think there's several topics to hit on from that game, and I think. Since you started there, I think we start with Zach McRoberts, and I'll go back to a tweet I had during the Indiana State game where I just simply didn't understand, and even during the exhibition season, I didn't understand why he wasn't getting minutes because I saw what he did in Crean's system last year, and I didn't see him as a system. A player reliant on a specific system. I thought his game could translate and could be beneficial in Archie Miller's system as a guy who comes in. He's a great on-ball defender. He's sneaky long and athletic. And he just has I think Archie described it after the game, he just has a natural knack of going to get the ball. And it's kind of an instinctual thing. I think you could speak to that not everybody has. It's not a talent or a skill-based thing. It's kind of instinctual where you just know where the ball may end up or is likely to end up and you're in the right spot at the right time. That doesn't happen by accident. And like you mentioned, he had a lot of rebounds that maybe didn't count because they were taps. And I think you could say the same thing about assists. Early in the game, he comes in, gets a tap right to Juwan Morgan for a layup, and then did it again a couple of minutes later. And I'm not sure if he gets credited for the assist on that or not, but they certainly should count as that. So I was happy to see that he's part of the rotation because I think he's a helpful player. I'm glad that he's finally found his spot. You mentioned from a walk-on standpoint, 1 point. You're never going to look at points from him. I think the one critique you could have from him is he needs to at least look to shoot the ball when he's open because he has shown the ability to knock it down. And there was a play in particular on Saturday where he caught it on the wing. Nobody was guarding him. And he immediately, without even looking at the rim, swung it to Hartman in the corner for a decent shot. He was somewhat open, but McRoberts was wide open, and he's got to at least be willing to shoot that shot if he's gonna play 30 minutes in a game, because teams will just slack off and play in the post, and Indiana doesn't have that many perimeter shooters, so teams will be able to do that. So those are my thoughts on McRoberts, but like you mentioned, Morgan was obviously the story of the game, and the way I wrote it, I saw this look in his eye like he was not going to let Indiana lose this one, and it could just be me hypothesizing there, but it just seemed like he was determined, even when Indiana was down late in the game, that they weren't going to lose that game.
Yeah, no question about that. And you're talking about his knack for the ball as well. He always seems to be a step ahead of everybody else. If you notice, he just kind of gets there. And every time you see someone diving out of bounds or doing anything that's a hustle play, it's, you just kind of imagine it's him. And he's always the one that gets up and, brushes his knees off and walks down the court. That's just kind of who he is. And I think a lot of players need that. I mean, he set the tone. I mean, if no guys are getting floor burns on the ground, it's tougher for the first guy to do that. But if you have a guy like McRoberts or even Hartman at times, you have guys that set that tone that make you a little more apt to do it. So it's nice to have guys like that on a team. And I think earlier in the year with Archie trying to find his lineup, he was really only playing 7 guys, maybe 8, and you saw he had to really figure out who could play. Josh got in foul trouble, and Duran wasn't being as effective, and I think Zach and Colin really picked up the slack.
Well, it's a tough game for people. Ask about Duran, and they say, how can that guy only have 2 points and 3 rebounds? And to some extent, that's a valid argument, but Notre Dame's a team that's going to really spread you out, kind of a lot like Michigan, and it's going to be hard for Duran to play in a game like that where he's going to have to guard on the perimeter without fouling. So I sort of understood why he wasn't as effective. What I'd like to see more out of him is him just back the guy into the post until he gets a layup or a foul when he's one-on-one like he did in the Duke game. He doesn't always do that, and I think that's frustrating to a lot of fans. Listening to some of the post-game comments from both coaches, I think it was very clear that Notre Dame was worried about Indiana on the offensive glass, and that was a big key. And you look at it, and they only get 10 offensive rebounds, but for Zach McRoberts, a walk-on, who wasn't even in the rotation at the beginning of the year, he had 7 of those 10 offensive rebounds. I think that's a remarkable statistic. You're not going to see his impact on the game necessarily in the box score, but that's one thing you point to. And then, of course, the big tip or the rebound and pass to Juwan for what ended up being the game-winning basket in overtime. That's something tangible that you can hold on to. But 7 out of 10 offensive rebounds from a walk-on that wasn't in the rotation, it just kind of boggles my mind and really speaks to how effective he was in that game. But Max, moving on, I wanted to touch on Juwan Morgan one more time real quickly. I think a lot of his success, and he's been by far Indiana's most consistent player in recent weeks, has been he's comfortable in his role. He's found his role in Archie's system, and he's very comfortable playing that role. I think a lot of times last year, and even as a freshman, you saw him sometimes roaming around the perimeter. He would take the occasional three-pointer, but now he's always around the paint, and he's taking shots that he can make. And that's why you see the numbers like 13 for 17, because he's not playing outside of himself. He's playing fully within himself. And I mean, his footwork continues to improve, but some of those shots he was just making over people at the end of the game and in overtime. I've never seen that from him before. And that's really kind of an evolution of his game, or maybe just a sign of confidence. But when you look at that from a big man's perspective, as a guy who was used mostly inside at Michigan and then were able to play on the perimeter at Indiana, what's your take on Juwan and the way he's kind of just found this one specific role and not tried to roam too far out of it to the perimeter or anything else?
Yeah, well, I think the most impressive thing I saw when I did the broadcast in Bloomington this year, early in the year, seeing him in Archie's offense for the first time was him cutting. And I kept harping on that on the broadcast. I was saying that the way he's cutting off these screens and finishing around the rim, he has a really good touch, and he's good at finding angles and using the backboard. And that's what you saw him. You saw him do that really well against Notre Dame as well. He's shooting over Bonzie Colson, and he's just kind of finding the right way to finish. And I was really impressed with that. You know, some of his shots, like, man, you probably shouldn't have shot that, but he just kind of had it. And when you have that, and you have that touch, and you're feeling hot, you just got to go with it. And late game, that was a great play call to have Juwan go to his right hand against Bonzie. Bonzie gave him a little bit too much chest right there and made a crucial mistake giving a 3-point play. It absolutely got bailed out by McRoberts, because, I mean, that's a huge missed free throw. But, he went from 0 to hero real quick, missing the free throw. Zach saved him, having the dunk with the exclamation point. So an absolutely unbelievable ending. I just watched a replay of it on Facebook, and I was getting chills again, just because it was so exciting. I mean, it's like, wow, that was such a, great way to, just have a Saturday be awesome. And, it was really fun to watch Indiana and to kind of see them, it's been a lot of anticlimactic endings lately with the Duke game in Louisville, where you feel like you're there. It was nice to have one of those fall. And, I was saying it's kind of similar to us 2 years ago. We went into this Crossroads Classic game, and we were, I believe, 8-4 or so. We lost a couple games in Maui and the Duke game, and this game really turned our season around. And teams are made in the Big Ten, especially teams with a new coach and a lot of new young pieces in there as well. Teams find themselves in the Big Ten season, and I think last year they came on strong early and just kind of lost momentum late and lost confidence. And this game could easily be used as the exact opposite. Tough losses early, Indiana State and all those, but I mean, those are history. I mean, I've seen there's been a lot of Izzo teams. Izzo always schedules tough in the fall, non-conference, and they'll come into the Big Ten and they'll have a poor win percentage some year, but it just toughens them up. It really does, and there's such a tough team to beat. Versus the guys that come in there with like 10-1 or whatever. It's not nearly as tough to beat those teams. So I think getting hardened with these Duke losses, and as long as you show you can respond to it well, that's the key that Indiana needs to do. And this is just the start.
Yeah. And in my column that I posted late Saturday night on albertsangle.com, I hit right on that comparison of you guys beating Notre Dame 2 years ago and that completely changing the trajectory of your season. And while it's not an apples and apples comparison, because I don't anticipate that this now puts Indiana on a level where they're going to go on to win the Big Ten championship and beat Kentucky and make the Sweet 16. But I do think we could look back on this as a potential turning point game for this team, because it's a win in Archie's system against a really good team. And I think that in and of itself builds belief of the players in Archie's and his system that, hey, it really does work. We were able to finish it off. If you just keep getting these moral victory after moral victory after moral victory, I think it gets old after a while, and you may have a couple guys starting not to believe in the system. But the way that they've improved defensively, you see them flying around and recovering for each other like we didn't see early in the year. And then the way that they're just able to take every blow Notre Dame gave them, a preseason All-American in Bonzie Colson. Juwan Morgan gave him everything he had and more. Outscoring him, was way more efficient, and that's just an outstanding performance. And like you mentioned with the play calls late in the game, I think for the first time we really got to see Archie in a very tight situational type situation. Call timeouts, drop a play and have those plays work. I think he drew one up, and Juwan got a quick basket, probably too quick because Notre Dame ended up getting fouled on the other end. But he was effective in his coaching, and I thought that kind of was really promising too when you look forward to the rest of the Archie Miller era, that his coaching down the stretch in tight games is very effective, and his players clearly believe in him. And then the third guy that was really key in the game, like you mentioned, was Robert Johnson. And I think more than the statistics, 20-6 and hitting 5 threes, is just seeing him confident and wanting to shoot the ball again, seeking the ball, trying to find a spot where he can get a little bit of space and get a shot off. I don't think we've seen that guy this year. I think we've seen a guy that knows he's struggling and is struggling a little bit with confidence, and you see that when he goes up and releases the shot. I thought he refound that confidence in the second half, and that's huge because he didn't score a point against Louisville, and you're going to have a hard time winning games against good teams when your senior leader doesn't score at all, regardless of what kind of defense he played on Matt Farrell on the other end, which was great. So it was great to see him break out of a slump, not only statistically, but also it looked like he felt like Robert Johnson again, the Robert Johnson we've known from the past 3 years.
Yeah, and I'll add on that. It's nice to actually see it happen. A lot of guys, the coaches tell them to visualize this, and at Michigan, we did a lot of positive visualization. See your shot going in, and a lot of my NBA ex-teammates they still do that, and you see the shot going, you see them winning the game. So when it happens, like, you just kind of make what you already saw happen, and it's tough to try to visualize, even for momentum and confidence and everything. It's tough to see that happen when everything in your recent memory, all these close games, the Dukes, the Louisvilles, even going back to last year, a lot of the tough ones they lost. It's just kind of it really wears on you. So having one like this, it could be something that helps turn around the season, but at the same time, it's good mentally because now they have to go play Fort Wayne, who obviously last year was the team that made them break apart. After those early season wins, Fort Wayne was really the one that kind of took their toll. So they have to go play Fort Wayne. Then they have Youngstown State and Tennessee Tech. They should be able to take care of business there. Then they have to go to Wisconsin, a place they haven't won in 10, 12 years or so. It's been a while. Joe, remember what that number is? I remember when we were there playing at Madison. It's like, oh yeah, Indiana hasn't won a year since.
It's definitely definitely double digits. It's in the 90s somewhere, but maybe 98. But I'm not for sure on that.
Yeah, 20 something.
At the same time, though, it is a very different Wisconsin team.
Yeah, it is, but it's also a mental hurdle as well. And I think a team that really values the ball, Wisconsin does historically, and they've had issues. So I think going up there will really help them build confidence and starting the Big Ten season. That if they can really just get this thing going and build as a team, this is the stretch where you see things happen in games, you see yourself winning, and get this streak going. It's easy to say this Notre Dame game helped turn around the season, but they're on a 1-game win streak. What can you make this streak do? You're going to Minnesota after Wisconsin. Can you make that happen? Then you have Penn State, Northwestern. Can you make those? You know what I mean? And
right.
and I think they know, like, they're not worried about not having the talent. They stuck with Duke. They went to the wire with Louisville. They beat Notre Dame. Like, they're a good team. They just, and Seton Hall even as well. They were in that. They just, down the stretch, Seton Hall got hot and it's tough. But they can play with anybody. It's just about coming together and making those intangibles piece together for a good team.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And to your point, this is only a turning point game if they build off of it, right? If they go and lose to Fort Wayne, or they don't carry the momentum that they gained from this game over to the next few and into the Big Ten, then it's not a turning point game. It's just a win in the middle of the season, fairly early in the season. But if they can take that momentum, kind of capture and look at what worked down the stretch against Notre Dame. And a lot of it had to do with Notre Dame playing poorly. I understand that they made a lot of mistakes, but Indiana refused to go away despite some calls going against them, and despite a rotation that I would argue is still kind of in flux. I don't think it's where it's going to be by season's end. There's only a certain number of players that he really trusts in crunch time right now, and I think that group will change as we go forward. So, yeah, to your point, beating Notre Dame in a neutral environment without any real contribution from what many would argue is their best player in Deron Davis is a really big accomplishment. I mean, I don't think that got enough coverage after the game. The fact that you're able to not only beat Notre Dame and come from behind and come from double figures in the second half, but do so without a huge statistical contribution from Deron Davis. That's pretty significant. And then you have your guard, Josh Newkirk, go 0 for 1 from the field and foul out. Justin Smith, again, barely played. I think he got in on the last possession. So to do what they did with the performances they got from guys they normally expect to be good, I think is a real positive sign of what's to come. If all these other guys, like Archie Miller mentioned in his post-game press conference, the first thing to do when they got back to Bloomington was to get these guys off the clouds, because quite frankly, they have quite a few players that aren't playing up to the level they're capable of. And if they do, this is a whole different team than even what we saw on Saturday. Real quickly, Max, I want to talk to you about Justin Smith and Al Durham, the two freshmen that have played. Al Durham got the start again on Saturday. Wasn't great again. He had 5 points, 1 for 3 from the field, played 16 minutes. Devontae Green was more the primary guard. He got 36 minutes. But Justin Smith, again, a guy that we saw play so well in that game against Seton Hall, and he's really been out of the rotation since. And I've talked to some people close to that program and close to that situation about what might be going on there. And I found out the source of the issue is that Justin, like I kind of alluded to, I think, in a recent podcast, isn't comfortable in his role, and therefore Archie isn't comfortable playing him in that role. He's wanting to use Justin Smith as kind of a small ball 4, while Smith is always played more on the wing and feels more comfortable at the 3. And so there's kind of been a learning curve for both sides, I think. And I think the fact that Justin doesn't have the, outward demeanor or the fiery demeanor that Archie has may take it a little longer for those two to figure each other out and learn how to best use Smith in those situations. But I do think it'll get figured out. They expect it'll get figured out at some point, but you just can't afford to put a guy, especially a freshman, in a game like this one if you're not fully confident in him playing the role that you've asked him to play. Yeah,
I mean, it's tough with freshmen because, a lot of predictions are tough. It's just because I think so many things change, and you're finding yourself in a new system. You're finding yourself in a whole new level of competition. And he's proven to be very effective in some and inconsistent in others. So, I mean, you got to trust the coach on this one. As far as Al goes, I do like what I have seen from him in his minutes. I think he's slippery. He's kind of slimy. He gets himself in the paint and in some good areas. Yeah, he had 5 turnovers against Louisville, but he does some good things. I like what he does, and I think he scores well too, just kind of finishing around the rim. So yeah, the 3-point shot could be a little more consistent, but as could it for the entire team. So you can't just put that on him.
Yeah, and the Al Durham 5 turnovers against Louisville really was a statistical anomaly to this point, because he doesn't turn the ball over hardly at all. So unless he does that again or does it multiple times, I'm going to think of it as an anomaly. The one thing I would like to see with him is the ability to add the outside perimeter jump shot, to be able to knock that down at a more consistent rate. But I think you could say that about a lot of guys on this team, because there just aren't that many guys that spread the floor, which really is what made what Juwan Morgan did and what Zach McRoberts did late in that game even more impressive, when you consider there aren't that many shooters and they're kind of packing the lane. Transitioning before we move off the Notre Dame game, just what did you see from the Indiana defense, and how different does that defense look in the way that they're recovering and helping for one another than it did game 1 against Indiana State?
Well, first off, that game, the Notre Dame game, was called very tight. I mean, every bump was a block, every touch was a foul, and it was stressful. I mean, you felt like you couldn't even, bump someone too hard or you had to almost let them score. I mean, Bonzi got called there at the end. There was one earlier where Colin came over to help and Torres got fouled, but he luckily missed the free throws. I mean, they were calling every single one of those. I mean, you can't blame them because they stayed consistent, but defensively, it's really hard to play good defense when the game's being called like that. Overall, I think they're just growing up as a team. I think Archie's doing it. He's a defensive-minded coach, and over the course of time, you give Archie time, he's going to make his team a better defensive team. I really like their doubles. I think they're doing a great job of when a guy like Bonzi Colson needs to be doubled on the post. They've done a very good job. The Duke game, they did a very, very good job. I was very impressed with how they were doubling the bigs in the Duke game. So I think they're looking more organized. They're playing more of a unit defense where everyone's kind of operating in sync. But yeah, I mean, I think they're just getting better, and you're going to consistently see that go on and on. It's what Archie focuses on, and it's what they're going to get better at.
What I've seen, and you can agree or disagree with this, Max, is a group that trusts each other a lot more than it did maybe early in the season, because I'm seeing them help and recover a lot more quickly. And to play that kind of defense, you have to have full faith in every one of your teammates on the floor that they're going to be able to help and recover in time as well, so that you don't give up an easy layup like Indiana State may have been getting game one or some other teams earlier in the season. You weren't seeing that against Notre Dame on Saturday. You were seeing successful, like you mentioned, doubles or helps and recovers, whatever the situation might have been. It was effective, a lot more so than it was. And I think a lot of that has to do with the players on the floor trusting one another. Agree or disagree with that?
No, I agree. I mean, and one thought comes to my head is when someone got beat on the perimeter and Zach McRoberts comes over to take that charge on Matt Farrell. And they didn't call it a charge. They actually called it an and one. And Matt Farrell's like pointing at the ref, and I was like, that's just, kind of annoying. When a guy has that sadistic smile, and even Gus Johnson on the broadcast was talking about how he's the bad guy today and he's getting booed, but I mean, he played well. But overall, defensively, yeah, you're right. I think you have a point. Guys are having each other's backs, and rotations are crisper. And overall, I mean, it's everything you said. I would completely agree. This team is, you have to be defensive oriented when, you're not really known for being a 3-point shooting team, and scoring can sometimes be tough. I mean, yeah, your Juwan's, he'll have this game, and Duran will have his game, but overall, one thing you can bring into every game is energy and effort on defense, and you can bring that into any arena. It's tough to shoot 50% from three in every arena, but you can definitely bring that intensity and energy on defense. And I think they're doing a good job of being organized as well.
As we wrap this episode up, I want to look big picture just really quickly. Does this team look differently to you now in terms of how they're going to perform in the Big Ten, or where they may finish than they did early in the season? A team projected to finish middle to the bottom of the Big Ten. Do you feel like the way that they've played, and also the way that some of the other Big Ten teams have struggled, could propel Indiana into the upper tier of the Big Ten now that they're playing at this level? Oh,
yeah. I mean, just the Big Ten as a whole, first off, the Big Ten has really been struggling lately. But Nebraska was right there with Kansas last night. I don't know if you saw that game at all. Indiana had the big win over Notre Dame. Rutgers beats Seton Hall, which is huge. Michigan State's going to be Michigan State. Michigan's proven to be pretty strong lately as well. So I think overall, I mean, the Big Ten's kind of finding their stride a little bit, which is exciting because I was very down on them early. But I mean, this is the time. So with Indiana, how they play into all that, I mean, it's all that storyline. If it's whoever's hot. It's tough to beat a team when they're on a 3-game win streak when you've lost 2 in a row. That's just how it goes. So if you can find that stride, keep that streak going, and stay confident, and go into these away arenas when everyone's against you and feel like your guys have their back, whether it's defensively or just being together as a culture. And that's how you win games on the road. And I think it's games like those Notre Dame game. It's like that Notre Dame game where, yeah, Torres probably should have won the game for them in regulation, and they did get a little lucky there on the offensive rebound where Bonzi Colson didn't box out and Juwan dunked it. But that game's just, it's refreshing. You get to the locker room and everyone's cheering and happy, and And it's a positive thing. And when you have a team that starts to believe, dangerous things can happen.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think the one thing we can say for sure is winning close games like they did on Saturday is going to come in handy later in the year, because I think outside of Michigan State, everybody else in the Big Ten to a certain extent is fairly even. They could all beat each other on any given day. And so I think we're going to see a lot of close games, and Indiana's going to have to be able to close those close games. They did on Saturday. We'll see if they are able to going forward. But that's it for our Indiana-Notre Dame breakdown. Max, quickly tell us a little bit about our new friends at 10th and College.
Yeah, we'd like to thank our friends at 10th and College. I just want to let you guys know that right now, you can sign a lease down at the leasing office on, yeah, you guessed it, 10th Street and College Avenue in Bloomington, Indiana, to be entered into a weekly $150 gift card drawing, as well as a grand prize of $500. So get on down to 10th and College, sign your lease. It's a great place to live. I lived there myself my last year at Indiana. Don't regret it at all. Great location, great people, great amenities, weight room, pool, everything you need right there in 10th and College. So go down, sign a lease. You won't regret it.
What's your favorite part about living at 10th and College, Max?
Favorite part is probably congregating with Nick Zeisloff and Ryan Burton in our living room and cooking up some dinner. And we got the stove going and had a little grill on the balcony and cooked up some steaks. Nick would handle the veggies. Bert would make the starch and come together and eat good, feel good, play good.
That kind of fits perfectly. It seems like Zeisloff would be a veggies guy. You bring the meat, and that's kind of what they brought to the table basketball wise as well. So that's that's interesting. So thank you to our friends at 10th and College, a new sponsor to earn your stripes. We really appreciate it, and get down there, sign your lease. You don't want to be left without a place to live next year when it comes February or March. So make sure you get in there, take advantage of their opportunities now, and sign a lease. That's all for this special episode of Earn Your Stripes. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Cardinal Spirits. Get in there and try out not only their distillery, but their food menu is well priced and made with fresh, quality, local ingredients. CardinalSpirits.com for all the information there. Hope you enjoyed this special edition analysis of the Indiana-Notre Dame game. For Max Bielfeldt, I'm Justin Albers, and we'll have another episode for you tomorrow. See you then.
I recall, I said, hey, babe, when you walk my way, you caught me on fire. Save me the time.